lot of eyes that are open, so that is a good sign. Thanks for hopping into the first morning session of the day. We've got Elliot here talking about Escrow Buddy, and really pumped to hear more about this tool. So yeah, sit back, enjoy the show.
Thank you, Eric. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. I am super excited to be able to introduce you today to Escrow Buddy. It's a tool that MDM administrators can use to ensure all their Macs have valid FileVault recovery keys escrowed. So the links I mentioned, as well as the slides themselves, are available from the URL that's on screen right now. And I'll display the URL again at the end of the slides, so you don't have to feel like you have to rush and write everything down as I'm talking about it. So, who am I? I'm Elliot Jordan. For years, I've helped create and maintain Mac open source tools like Recipe Robot, Autopackager, DocLib. I was an IT consultant for 10 years before becoming a client platform engineer for companies with large Mac fleets. And now I'm a senior client systems engineer at Netflix. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to get right into what you all probably came here to see. This is going to be a 1-minute demo of Escrow Buddy in action. Let me set the scene here. On the bottom, we've got a Mac that was encrypted prior to enrollment in Jamf. So we don't have a recovery key escrowed for that Mac. We've already deployed Escrow Buddy to the Mac, and we've configured it properly. So it should be ready to generate a new key upon the next login. On the left, we're streaming the local Escrow Buddy logs. There's not much to see yet, but we're connected over SSH to that Mac, and you'll be able to see the logs when the thing happens. And on the right, I've set up a looping API query to Jamf to show us what Jamf knows about the recovery key status for that Mac. As you can see, there's no recovery key information available right now. So let's start things off by logging out on that Mac. As soon as our FileVault user logs out and then logs in again, a new FileVault key is generated, as you can see shortly on the logs on the left. There we go. And then upon next recon, whenever that is, the key is escrowed to Jamf. The key that was just generated gets sent to Jamf. This recon doesn't need to happen at login, but for demonstration purposes, I've set it up that way. And in just a minute, we'll see on the right what Jamf knows about that key. Recon takes a minute. There you go. So as you can see, we now have a valid FileVault recovery key in Jamf according to the API. That's it. That's really the basics of Escrow Buddy right there. Right. Yeah, thank you. Good night. Yeah. Now that you've seen it in action, though, I want to start from the beginning and kind of explain why this is even needed in the first place, give you some context around why we created Escrow Buddy. So FileVault keys can be missing from MDMs for any number of reasons. One major reason was migrating from a previous MDM. Maybe the keys were escrowed to that MDM, and you don't have them in your new MDM, for example. The one that affected us most, the Macs might be encrypted prior to their enrollment in your MDM. So maybe that key is escrowed to iCloud, maybe it was just written down or screenshotted or something like that, but it's not in your MDM. Or maybe the escrow profile that tells the computer to deliver the key to the MDM when it generates a new one was misconfigured somehow. You know, the wrong payload or the wrong scope or something like that. The Mac didn't have the right MDM profile there. Or, heaven forbid, some kind of a data loss event occurred or some kind of a database corruption, and your MDM no longer has the recovery key that it once did for that Mac. So in all of those cases, how do we fix this? Turning FileVault off and on again will actually generate a new key and escrow that key. But obviously there's some risk there because the Mac is unencrypted for a time. And you're not guaranteed for the person who's turning it off to remember to turn it back on again. So that's not something I recommend. Running the FD setup tool. This is the full disk encryption setup command line tool that Apple provides with macOS. If you run FD setup change recovery -personal, any FileVault authorized administrator can rotate the key right then and there, and that new key will be sent up to your MDM if you have the proper MDM profile delivered. However, not everybody's familiar with terminal commands or comfortable entering those, and it doesn't scale well either. Having to have people type in on their computer in bulk is not a great scaling strategy. So the other option is to automate FD setup. It actually can take an input plist as an input with the password or credentials that we need to escrow that, or to generate a new key as input. So this is the most scalable path to remediation. But the question is, how specifically do we automate FD setup and provide that input? To do that, we'll either need the existing valid personal recovery key, which in the scenarios I just outlined, we don't have, or we need the password to a FileVault authorized user. We need them to provide that information in order to generate a new key. So that's what we're going to focus on. But how do we get that user's password in a secure, safe, and trusted way? The old way to do this, the bad way to do this, which is done by many organizations and even some MDMs, is to prompt the user for their password. That usually involves setting some context, making the user aware about what's going to happen, on-screen message or email or tapping them on the shoulder, prompting for their password, doing the automation with FD setup, waiting a moment, there it is, doing the automation with FD setup behind the scenes once we have the password, and then finally communicating the result to the user, whether it was successful or failed, and they need to contact the help desk, for example. So setting all of this context, doing all of this right, requires a tremendous amount of work. It's a lot of moving parts. There's probably emails in advance of the remediation campaign. There's meetings with various departments to convince them that this is a good idea. There's building the on-screen messaging to make sure that it's using your branding, your company branding, and it's kind of a trusted experience that people are aware of. Training your help desk support techs to know what to expect from users and how to respond to those tickets that are going to come in. Preparing your InfoSec team, because your phishing address is probably going to get some activity from suspicious employees who weren't expecting this because they didn't read their email. Providing a self-service item to get users into this flow in a kind of a opt-in way, if you want. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of work to do well, and I'm putting well in quotes here, it's not that great. Take it from me, I've done this. Unfortunately, this method, even worse, conditions users to be more accepting of credential prompts in general, which is a primary vector that malware uses to get a foothold on Macs and any computers. You're not building a healthy security culture by doing this. So I have a confession. I'm partially responsible for that old bad workflow. I presented that method back in 2015. I put my script and my workflow onto GitHub, and I've been diligently maintaining it in a working state for year after year, including now, as far as I know, it still works. I had good intentions, but I was unaware until last year that there was a better way. And now that I'm aware, I'm here shouting from the rooftops to all of you, stop doing that old way, do this instead. So I think I'm the most qualified to say I was wrong. The new, better way is to use an authorization plugin. These plugins are used by macOS, the login window specifically, to make decisions and provide automation around the login process. A huge benefit of authorization plugins is that they can securely access the credentials that are being used to log in by the user and piggyback on that process to use those credentials elsewhere. So one common example of this is federation to an IDP from the login window, such as what Jamf Connect enables. An authorization plugin is ideal for automating FD setup since it can leverage the trusted macOS login interface to do it, obviating the need for any additional password prompts, no time-consuming communication, no meetings with people, no support tickets from suspicious users, and no maintenance of fragile shell scripts. So that is the new, better way. I'm going to zoom in here on kind of the diagram that I've created of all the systems and components that are used by the authorization plugins and Escrow Buddy specifically. It centers around, the most important thing at the bottom there, is the macOS login window. This is the unaltered macOS login window experience for end users. They just log in like they've been doing for years. As far as they know, there's nothing extra happening behind the scenes. Then we've got the authorization policy database, the security server, and the FD setup binary are all components of this puzzle, and they're all built into macOS. We're using Apple's first-party tools to do this. Escrow Buddy itself includes the items in green, which comprise the authorization plugin and a script that adds the mechanism from the authorization plugin to the macOS authorization database using the security command. When you deploy Escrow Buddy, you'll also include the items in orange as well. That includes a configuration profile enabling the recovery key escrow. You may already be distributing this if you're using Jamf's FileVault MDM payload, that's included. And a plist created with the defaults command that tells Escrow Buddy that key regeneration is needed at next login. The beauty of this arrangement is that Escrow Buddy doesn't actually handle creating the key itself or communicating the key itself, instead relying all on Apple's built-in tools and capabilities. We don't have to do any of the encryption or any of the network communication or any of that. That's all first-party Apple stuff, as if a user had typed FD setup change recovery dash personal. That's it. So it's a great idea. How come nobody had done it before? Well, as it turns out, Crypt did it. It was introduced as a feature of Crypt in about 2017. So for those who aren't familiar, Crypt is an authorization plugin that's most often paired with a Crypt server in order to escrow FileVault, personal recovery keys, and other secrets that you want to escrow. The Crypt agent can be deployed standalone with no Crypt server and generate new keys upon login, which is exactly what we want. However, Crypt is primarily targeted at administrators who are running a Crypt server. They're escrowing their keys to Crypt server, not MDM. The included payload and the documentation and the code base is written by and for those who don't escrow their FileVault keys to any MDM. That's what the Crypt server is for. So we realized there was going to be a potential gap to be filled in the ecosystem for an authorization plugin that generates new FileVault keys specifically to escrow to MDM and no more. So we at Netflix, the client systems engineering team, built a new authorization plugin that was a stripped down alternative to Crypt, the Crypt agent, laser focused on generating new personal recovery keys to escrow to MDM specifically. So FileVault, or Escrow Buddy generates the new FileVault keys upon login once it's properly configured, and at no other time, just at login. And Escrow Buddy has a built-in check to make sure that the escrow payload from MDM is configured properly, and that when that key is generated, it's going to land at the proper destination. So that's it. We tried to keep it really simple and not include stuff that MDM administrators, people who escrow keys to MDM, probably won't need. The simplicity has been a big part of its success, I think. And speaking of that success, this is our specific story at Netflix. When we started this project, about half of our Mac fleet had invalid or missing FileVault personal recovery keys, mostly because they were encrypted prior to when they were enrolled into MDM. We started testing Escrow Buddy in around March and April of this year, 2023, and then deployed broadly to Netflix Macs in May. And Escrow Buddy has helped us go from 50% to almost 95% key validity since deployment in only a few months. And so if you want to achieve similar results at your organization, maybe you're starting from 90% and you just need that extra boost to get to 100, or maybe you have literally 0 keys and you need to regenerate them all. So how do you do that? I'll tell you. So the basic deployment with Jamf, starting to use Escrow Buddy with Jamf, is pretty simple. We have a page on our wiki specifically for Jamf and other MDMs as well, but you'll probably be more interested in Jamf, linked below. And there's also a PDF guide from the folks at HCS, also linked there. And again, those links are going to be at the end. They're all on GitHub, so you don't have to jot those down furiously. All the links are going to be in the resources. So the process is basically to download the latest Escrow Buddy release package from GitHub and upload that to Jamf. Create a smart group that collects Macs that have missing or invalid FileVault recovery key status. And then create a policy that installs Escrow Buddy and runs the defaults command on those computers. So the defaults command is just flipping a value called generate new key to true. And what that does is it tells Escrow Buddy to generate a new FileVault key upon next login. Without that generate new key preference value set, Escrow Buddy will take no action at all. So that's it. Keys will be generated on the next login, and a subsequent recon will send the new key to Jamf, as you saw at the beginning. You can go beyond the basics. You can get pretty creative. Some organizations could benefit from, for example, separate policies for installation and configuration. I prefer this myself because it reduces the setup time on Macs that already have Escrow Buddy installed and just need it to be configured. So breaking up the install from the config into two separate policies, I think works pretty well. And the install obviously would be once per computer, and the config would be maybe weekly or monthly or as many times as the Mac needs it. And speaking of that, recidivism detection. So in other words, detecting when Macs go from a valid state to an invalid state multiple times. You want to probably flag those and investigate them because you want to figure out what the root cause is of that. Another creative use of the tool is automatic key rotation. Now, this is a feature of Crypt. One of the reasons that Crypt is awesome and that many people stopped escrowing to MDM and start escrowing to Crypt instead is because it allows you to audit who accesses your keys. It allows you to set up an approval process for people to get access to keys, and it allows you to automatically rotate those keys on a regular basis if you so desire. So definitely check out Crypt if any of those things sound appealing to you. But you can use Escrow Buddy to do something similar with the key rotation. I haven't written up all the details, but you can pause and play this back if you want. I think the idea is going to be to set a date stamp in a script for when the key was generated by Escrow Buddy, read that date back in an extension attribute, and then scope the defaults command to a smart group of Macs where that date stamp is greater than X days, where X is the number of days you want to rotate the key. So I think that would be the idea. I haven't done that myself. I'm just kind of brainstorming here. And then another advanced workflow option could be notifying users that a logout is required to generate a new key. Now, before you go that route, I would urge you to consider whether you really need this. Chances are, if you're doing any sort of other logout or restart enforcement for macOS software updates, for example, you probably don't need this. Netflix actually went from 50% to 95% key validity with no user notifications of any kind. So definitely try that route first. It's going to be a lot less work for everybody involved before you start notifying people. But it is possible if you want to go down that route. So many of the methods here are outlined in the wiki, linked on screen, and there are definitely other creative options that people will probably come up with in the future. The wiki, for those of you who are familiar with GitHub, all you have to do is have a GitHub account and you can edit that wiki. So if you come up with a cool option in the future and you want people to know about it, I would urge you to add that to the wiki. That's the reason we created the wiki, so that people can maintain it and contribute their ideas. So some miscellaneous tips for troubleshooting techniques and tips for using Escrow Buddy that might be helpful. Reading logs is really important. You can use the log show or log stream commands to read Escrow Buddy logs. This is the macOS unified logging framework. To do log stream, you have to be connected in real time when the Mac that is logging in is logging in. So in theory, that would require a Mac connected over SSH on the same network or something like that. So that may not be convenient all the time. You can use log show to go back in time and show me the logs from Escrow Buddy between 15 minutes ago and 10 minutes ago or something like that. Importantly, if you're ever unable to log in because of Escrow Buddy or any authorization plugin, you can use SSH to read the logs, and you can use recovery mode to kind of reset the state of the authorization database. There's information on the troubleshooting page on the wiki for that. I haven't encountered that with either Crypt or with Escrow Buddy, thankfully, but with authorization plugins, that's always a risk, so just be aware of that. Do testing to make sure when new OS versions come out, for example, you want to make sure any authorization plugin that you're using, whether it's Escrow Buddy or Crypt or Jamf Connect or anything like that, works with that new version. So use Appleseed for IT to access those. Another cool tip that I was kind of forced to discover during this process, tracking success over time. Like, you don't want to just roll it out and cross your fingers and hope that everything works. You want to actually see how many computers am I fixing with this. So what I did, there may be a better way, but what I did was basically 2 saved advanced searches in Jamf. One for invalid keys, one for valid keys, both limited to Macs that have checked in within 30 days. And I found that that was reasonably accurate, and that's how we generated the graph that you saw a couple slides ago. And something else to be aware of, some macOS versions, usually major upgrades, but every once in a while a major update, will reset the state of the authorization database back to defaults, usually because there's an important change being made to the database, but sometimes for other reasons too. So I do have a blog post for details on fixing this. It's going to be in the links, but there's a one-liner that you can run that basically reruns the Escrow Buddy post-install script and puts it back into the authorization database. Again, make sure you're testing that new version, not just blindly re-enabling it. You want to make sure that your users can still log in with that new version with Escrow Buddy. But I haven't encountered problems so far, but you might want to just make sure. As with everything else in the session, more details on the wiki. So I know from talking to a lot of you in the hallways and at meals and stuff this week that you've already been deploying Escrow Buddy successfully, and that's super amazing for me to hear. I'm really happy about that. That's why we did this. We want to help everybody, not just solve a need for ourselves. So we're trying to gather some real data on this project's impact out in the world. So we've put together a 2 or 3 minute survey that's linked here. It's anonymous. It's just basic information about when did you deploy, how many Macs do you manage, and how many were remediated by Escrow Buddy. A couple other questions, but we would super appreciate if you took the time to fill that out, because it helps us prioritize. It helps us see that our work is being used in the world and put more effort into maintaining that if it's popular. And a quick but important note on hosting. Netflix is super proud to have partnered with the MacAdmin open source organization to host the source code for Escrow Buddy on GitHub. This puts Escrow Buddy alongside other important tools like Nudge, UMAD, and the MacAdmin's Python package. We've configured automation that allows Escrow Buddy to be signed and notarized by the MacAdmin's open source signing certificate when new releases are available. So that's really going to help maintenance and streamline things when new versions of Escrow Buddy come out. Hosting in MacAdmin's open source also ensures community contribution and maintenance will be as easy as possible for as long as possible, we hope. So linked and pictured here is a session from the PSU MacAdmins conference in July, where I joined some esteemed colleagues and open source contributors to discuss the MacAdmins open source organization. So definitely check out that session on YouTube if you're interested in that. They're actively looking for other projects that contribute to something that the community needs and is going to be maintained in a certain way. So definitely check out that organization. It's been really great. So getting to the end here, I just want to circle back to some takeaways that I hope that people can walk out the room with. I encourage you to check how many Macs in your fleet have missing or invalid FileVault keys. It's not something that years ago that I was paying very close attention to. But when I actually pulled the numbers, I was kind of shocked. Like, we're actually missing a lot of these. And it's kind of heartbreaking when somebody forgets their password or gets locked out of their Mac for some reason. They call the help desk. They say, I'm sorry, I thought I wrote down my key, but I don't have it. And the help desk has to say, I'm sorry, we don't have it either. And there's a potential data loss event, and nobody wants that, So it's really great to say yes to people. Yes, I've got your back. I can look up your key. So definitely check that out in your fleet and pull the numbers and see how many are affected by this. And consider whether Escrow Buddy is something that you might use to remediate that. It worked really well for me. I know it works for others, but test it out, make sure it's going to work well for you. And especially if you're using any sort of password prompt workflow, whether that's FileVault related or anything, I would encourage you to reconsider that. If you're doing FileVault regeneration and escrow by prompting people for their password, you should really switch to Escrow Buddy. Or Crypt if you're going in that direction. But it's going to kind of raise the culture of security in the Mac admin community if many organizations move away from that old bad workflow and move towards something like Escrow Buddy. So I think we're trying to create a rising tide for everybody here. And that's pretty much it. We've got a lot of time for questions and I hope discussion. We did that on purpose because we want everybody to be interested and use Escrow Buddy at your organizations. So I'd be happy to take any questions if there are.
All right, let's give a quick hand for Elliot, because that was amazing. Now, I also have to say how proud I am of Jamf Nation, because I didn't even give you all a reminder to use the app for questions, and they're just pouring in. So give yourself a round of applause, because that was great. Especially on the last day. So we do have a lot of questions. But before I start asking them, if we don't get through all of them, where can they find you for follow-ups?
Yeah, the Escrow Buddy GitHub repo has an issues feature, as with many GitHub repos. If you have specific feedback or questions about usage, that's a good way to reach us. There's also the Mac Admin Slack. Everybody's heard about that by now, but there's a FileVault channel that's probably the most appropriate to ask questions. Or yeah, you can DM me directly on Mac Admin Slack if you want. I like when people use the FileVault channel, though, because it's probable that if you have the question, that others do too. So it's nice to kind of share as a community. But if you have specific things that you want to ask privately, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. All right, let's get into it. So I'm just going to go by votes for right now, and then we'll see where we are on time. But does Escrow Buddy work when other authorization plugins are present? So think Jamf Connect. Really good question.
Yes. With a caveat, if there are other plugins that do the same thing, you might get unpredictable results. There is an order to the authorization database, so I haven't seen anybody land in that situation. But for example, if Jamf Connect adds a feature someday that escrows FileVault recovery keys in this manner, which I would not be opposed to that, then you no longer would want to deploy Escrow Buddy. But I haven't seen it conflict with any other authorization plugins as of yet.
Awesome.
But test.
Always test. This one, you did touch on this a little bit, but I still think it's a relevant question, and it's something that I'm sure organizations struggle with, and that's getting users to do what they should do and actually log out and or reboot every once in a while. I think we've all been guilty of it at some point, but what are some other strategies that you've seen your organization use or have other ideas on how to do that? I know you mentioned software updates, but just if you had some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's probable that you have more pressing reasons for people to log out or restart, or at least you should, in this modern era. But if you really want to make an issue of the escrow of the key, there are some other strategies you can use to notify people. Like I would urge you to do the lightest touch possible. Like just posting a notification that says, please log out at your earliest convenience is probably fine. Putting something in self-service, or if you use Monkey Managed Software Center, is probably fine. I actually have a blog post 99% done. I think I'll probably post it later today, specifically about that question, because I knew that was going to get asked, and I wanted to be a little bit more polished and have some ready-made answers for people who use, for example, Swift Dialog or IBM Notifier or Data Jar Notifier. There's a bunch of different examples that post will have. It's not online yet, but for the YouTube audience, it'll be online by then. Just wait a couple days and it'll probably be on. And when it is, I'll update the links for the session too, so that
Awesome.
that'll be included. Yeah.
Cool. How does it handle systems that have a valid key but continuously show a status as invalid?
Yeah, I would urge you to reach out to Jamf and offer some feedback about that. I have also encountered an issue where Macs do have a valid key, but after a recon, the key is marked as unknown. I hear that might be fixed soon, so hold your breath and wait for that. But if that doesn't fix it, if the coming update doesn't actually work, and you still see Macs in that situation, then definitely reach out to Jamf or whatever MDM is telling you that that's not valid.
So I guess kind of on that theme, this is all automated, and that's great. We love automation. So why wouldn't it be 100% if everything's automated?
Good question. I wish it was 100%. One good reason for Netflix anyway is that we are still continuously enrolling people into MDM. And those enrolled Macs usually have already been encrypted long ago. They just haven't been enrolled into MDM. So we're still in the process of that campaign. And that's why there's a little bit of cream on the top still of computers that haven't yet been enrolled and then subsequently logged out again. It hasn't been long enough for them to be caught by that update process or other reasons to log out. That's one reason. The other reason is the aforementioned recon flips the status to unknown issue, which hoping will be fixed soon.
Cool.
Not a future-looking statement.
Are there any plans for Escrow Buddy to also handle some similar security escrows like bootstrap tokens or secure tokens?
No. Trying to keep it simple, focusing on FileVault. I think that's the success recipe.
How does a PRK become unknown, and is that the same as missing?
Yeah, I could imagine if you manually regenerated a FileVault, a new FileVault recovery key, when the Mac was in an MDM broken state, for example, and it couldn't escrow, it couldn't communicate with your MDM, or the certificate in that MDM payload was invalid or something, and it just literally couldn't communicate that back to the server, then I can imagine that the MDM would say invalid or unknown. What the Jamf recon is doing is it's actually taking that stored key that Jamf has and it's running FD setup. I forget what it's called. I think it's verify recovery, and it's passing that recovery key into that binary to determine whether it's valid or not. So that actually doesn't happen right away when you recon because it doesn't know the key yet when you escrow. So when you escrow the first time, that first recon, it will store the key in Jamf, and then subsequent escrows will validate the key in Jamf because Jamf now knows about it. So I know that 2 recons isn't always necessary. There's actually a really good blog post from the Traveling Mac guy that I will also add to the links, explaining why, in theory, 1 recon should be sufficient. That security info MDM command is really the magic sauce, and that does tend to happen around recon, but it also happens at other times too. So there's a lot of moving parts, but in general, within a recon or 2, it should be marked as valid after a new key is generated.
Cool. Are there considerations for mobile users versus local users? Obviously, we see a lot of organizations migrating to local users. So during that transition, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, caveat, we don't use mobile accounts, so I can't speak firsthand, but in theory, it shouldn't matter as long as the user that's logging in is FileVault authorized, whether they're a local user or mobile or any other. So, yeah.
So on the topic of OS updates, we know they have a tendency to reset Auth DB. How do we handle that portion of it? Are you able to reinstall Escrow Buddy before the login window loads or after an OS update?
Yeah, that first login after the authorization database gets reset, you might have to just let that go. You might not be in the place right there where you can have everything ready to go at the next login. But to be honest, I haven't seen this happen much recently. I think it happened from Monterey to Ventura because there were some changes in the authorization database. It used to happen in older OS versions during updates as well, but you'll have to go back and look at the receipts. But I haven't seen it happen in Ventura specifically on any of the updates. From Ventura to Sonoma, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised. Right. But yeah, just something to check every time a new patch, a new OS update or OS upgrade comes out. It's just one of the things on my list to test.
Yeah, fair enough. With this
And to answer the question, there's just a one-line command that you can run that basically reruns Escrow Buddy's post-install script and puts it back into the authorization database. You could reinstall Escrow Buddy. That's a valid alternative too. In the wiki, we actually have an extension attribute that shows you whether Escrow Buddy is configured in the authorization database. And on my blog, I even have another extension attribute that you can use to tell you what index position Escrow Buddy is in the authorization database, whether it's like 12 or 13 or whatever it is on the list. So I don't know if that's useful to anybody, but there are many ways you can use to kind of make sure that that authorization database is where you want it.
A couple of questions came in around Sonoma, so obviously testing for that.
Yep.
Yeah. Would this process work for previously deployed Macs that were not encrypted?
Can you say that again? Previously what? Macs?
Previously deployed Macs that were not encrypted.
Previously deployed Macs that were not encrypted. So if it's not encrypted, there's no recovery key, and it's kind of out of scope for this whole tool. So this only helps you if you have enabled FileVault in the first place. And if you enable FileVault using Jamf, whether it's via policy or MDM profile, then your key will be escrowed to Jamf. If you have everything set up correctly, you still won't need Escrow Buddy. Now, turning on FileVault should, in theory, give you that key. This is really just for those edge cases where FileVault was turned on before you were enrolled, or the payload wasn't set up properly, or whatever other reason. That's what we're trying to solve.
Sorry, they're just coming in hot and heavy right now.
Nice.
So does Escrow Buddy work if a user just reboots and then logs in through FileVault with pass-through enabled, since this will bypass the usual sign-in screen?
Yes, because you're technically still going through the login window. All those mechanisms in the login window database are still running. And if your password is the same from FileVault to login, then you skip the login window, but all the things still happen. So yes, that should still work. And in fact, some of the notification tools that I will be blogging about make it easy to give you like a logout button in the action of the notification. Others, it's not so easy, so it's maybe simpler to initiate a restart. With Apple Script, you have to do some automation grants in PPPC and other things that you just kind of don't want to get into unless you have other reasons to do that. So a restart is a valid alternative to log out if you want.
What happens after the key is regenerated? Does Escrow Buddy change the default setting back to false?
Yes. And that is why you have to create that plist with a defaults command, not deploy the plist using MDM, because we need to be able to change it back to false to prevent Escrow Buddy from regenerating the key at every login. That would be, you don't want that. So it actually does check to see whether if the generate new key setting in preferences is forced by MDM, that's a misconfiguration. That's not what we recommend, and Escrow Buddy will just abort. So yeah, that's why we say you should use a defaults command for that, because it gets reset back to false.
This is a little bit of a long one, so bear with me a minute. In a workflow that would automatically rotate keys, does the old key still work, and is it still properly escrowed if the user has not logged out and back in? Or could it introduce new unknown keys until the user logs out and back in?
Well, I kind of reject the premise. I'm kind of curious, like if somebody's in the room who asked that question, what organization requirement would force you to re-rotate the key on a regular basis? I haven't actually met any compliance folks who say that that's required. That's a unique key for each computer. It's stored securely in the MDM. It's the same as like the certificate that they use to communicate. So I'm not sure I buy into why the key would need to be rotated in the first place. Setting that opinion aside, yeah, I see there could be a race condition if, for example, at the next login, the new key was generated, but for some reason, maybe the network was off or the profile was misconfigured, the key didn't get escrowed. So Jamf or the MDM would have the old key, and meanwhile, the effective key on the computer would be new and be waiting to be sent somewhere. So if the user forgot their password right at that moment in that situation, I could see why that might cause a race condition. So that's another reason that I probably wouldn't want to rotate the keys willy-nilly. I would want to make sure that it's ideally not rotated, but if you have to rotate, as long as possible between the periods to give a couple logins before that situation could happen.
How did you determine which clients had invalid keys?
Well, there is a Jamf attribute that you can use called, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, FileVault recovery key status, something like that. Robert's got me. Key validation? Individual key validation. Yep, that sounds right. So this is not institutional keys, which are no longer recommended by Apple, but the individual key validation is one of several values. I think it's unknown, maybe missing invalid and valid. So that's what we use. We just made an advanced search keying off of that. There are other FileVault 1 related attributes, and I think there have been open source and community contributions for extension attributes that also pull that same information, but I just use the one that's built into Jamf.
Cool. And we touched on it super briefly in that answer, and this is around personal keys versus institutional keys.
Yep.
It's a topic that we at Jamf know and love. We're obviously moving away from institutional keys, but is it recommended to only have the personal key as opposed to both?
I think you should check with Apple's documentation. I think the answer is yes, and the personal key is recommended now. Institutional keys are not.
And versus both, having both. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Let's see. There was one question in here. It wasn't even a question. It was more, well, it was a question about how long it took you to get here, because somebody always grimaces anytime they have to deal with this. But I can't find it anymore, so I butchered the wording on it. But that was the theme of the question, is about how long it took you to get to where you are with this project.
Once we really devoted the resources to fixing the FileVault recovery key issue, it didn't take long to figure out that this was the route we wanted to go. We started down the other route at first because I was unaware. I didn't know that there was a better option. So in 2022, we started building the notifications and writing email drafts and having meetings with people, and it was painful. I wanted out, but I felt reluctantly like I had to trod forward because that was the workflow that I was familiar with. Then one of my colleagues, Johnny Ramos, said, "Hey, I had a really good experience with Crypt at a place that I used to work. Have you checked out Crypt? Because we didn't have to do any of this stuff when we were using Crypt." And that got my wheels turning. I knew that we probably didn't need to go full Crypt. We didn't need to go full Crypt server. It's not something we wanted to explore at the time. But I was interested in how Crypt was doing that magic that made it so you didn't have to prompt the user for their password. So that's when I learned about authorization plugins, and everything else seemed really obvious to follow that path.
Perfect. I think we hit all of them, and if I missed any, I apologize. The screen kind of refreshes on me. I'll end with this one because I know we're just about at time too. This is from User Anonymous, so if you're in the room, please raise your hand so we can help you out here. Basically just said, I personally use your old way and really excited to try the new way. So
amen. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Elliot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.